Hey there, this is Kat Ramirez. I am CEO and founder of Advertise and hashtag Social Buzz. Thank you for joining me today. I have a very, very special guest today. So I put in the notes, and so before I introduce Gift to you, if you have any questions, because I know a few people were really excited about having Gift come on the show today. But if you have any questions, please drop them in the line, and then we can ask Gift these questions while we have him live. And so, without further ado, I am going to invite my guest, Gifford Collins, who is CEO and founder of Collins Law. Right?
Hi, Kat.
Hey.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. How's
Thanks
it
for having me
going?
on. Good, good.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So if you want to take a moment and give people your song and dance and what it is that you do, take it
Yeah,
away.
yeah, okay, all right. I am an estate planning, a business succession, and trust administration attorney. So what I do is I don't do litigation necessarily, but what I do is I help people plan for life's emergencies and um, you know when unexpected happening. So wills, trusts, powers of attorney, but also on the business side, setting up those key employee agreements to make sure that you can capture the value of your business. And then when something does happen to folks, the trust administration and probate administration to help your family get through those times as smoothly and efficiently as possible.
Okay. Awesome. Is- Um, okay. So let's just get started with. I have questions that I want to ask so that this will maybe stir up some people who are thinking about your business and how they can help. So we're going to talk about the current situation. So if I think about your business model, I would think that your business model is extremely important now, especially during this pandemic, that an unexpected, unknown thing that it comes and invades, our world, my universe, your universe, whoever's universe, and it doesn't pick and choose who it selects. And unfortunately, for some of those people, they don't survive. And some of those people probably quite could have been a business owner, or a family, or whatever. And in their situations, if they didn't have something in place, then what happens to that? Yeah,
Yeah.
give us an
So
idea, because I think this is a good, kind of case study, right?
yeah, and unfortunately now it's extremely unexpected.
Yes.
There's a lot of information out there, and I find one of the scariest things for me. I hate operating from a place of unknowns, but sometimes who's going to be unaffected by this and who is going to be affected by it. So anytime there's an unexpected passing or accident in the family or something like this, it's always good to have a plan in place. And if there isn't anything in place, what's going to happen is really kind of based on your situation. So if you're a single person and you become incapacitated, then your family members are going to have to go to court and become your guardian in order to make financial or healthcare decisions for you, which is never a good time to have to go in front of a judge and argue that you should be able to take care of someone. It's just
Right.
not something they want to be thinking about. They want to think about your care. They don't want to think about all the legal stuff they have to do in order to actually be able to make those decisions for you. If you're married, of course, then you just add in your spouse. If you've got kids, that's most people with kids, that's your biggest concern, is who is going to take care of the kids if we can't do it, whether it's because both of the parents are incapacitated or they've passed away or together. So if there isn't a plan in place, then again, there may be a temporary guardianship through family services, and then they initiate a guardianship proceeding where a guardian is appointed for the kids, which isn't always the person that the parents would have chosen initially. And then, there's the asset issue. So, how are the assets going to be managed, and will they be managed properly? And there are rules, statutes that control how money that is in the hands of minors can be used, right? Because they can't enter into contracts, so the guardians are going to have control over that, but they are also limited in how they'd actually be able to spend the money for the kids. So by having a plan in place, you can kind of say, we don't want to deal with those rules necessarily. We want our money to be based on our trust, or we've predetermined we want the money to be used. And that's gives a lot of people peace of mind. That's kind of what I'm dealing in here is giving people the peace of mind, because if you're up at night worrying about these things, and estate planning is definitely one of those things where you can kick it down the road for 5, 10, 15 years, and then something happens to somebody else, and you're like, oh boy, I better get that taken care of.
Right.
So, and then as far as a business, I am a small business owner, you're a small business owner, and you and I both know how hard we work to get these things off the ground in the first place, and then to keep them going is another story.
Mm-hmm.
So all that effort really won't translate into value unless there's a way for policies and procedures in place to kind of do a brain dump, and take all the information you have in your head and get it into a place where somebody else would actually be able to use it, which is what creates value in your business. So when we're dealing with business succession planning, often what we'll want to do is find a key employee who gets it and, would be in a situation to take over the business if something were to happen to the business owner. And we put those key employee agreements and the buy-sell agreements together. And one of the biggest things is, well, how do you evaluate the business? So we can work on that as well, and kind of set how the value would work.
Yep.
If there isn't anything in place, then maybe the spouse has to get involved in order to transfer those shares to a potential partner or try and sell it. But with a small business, again, if all the value is wrapped up in the head of the business owner that's either incapacitated or passed away, it's going to be really hard to capture that value after something like that happens. So the goal is to coach that person to a point where they can capture that value before one of those things happens. So there's so many different things that could happen, Kat.
Right. No, I understand. And we have a comment from LaShonda. I don't know if you see that on the screen, Giff. She asked, how do you start a trust fund? And you thought you weren't going to be asked this question.
So a trust fund, you can create a revocable living trust, which is just, it's kind of like creating a business for yourself, and you put your assets into it, and it doesn't really give you any asset protection or anything like that. So a trust fund, if what you mean is, once you create a revocable living trust, it's really just a piece of paper that says it's an agreement between you and yourself, or you and your spouse and yourselves, that says, we want to create a trust. We're going to create that trust. And then step 2 is very important. So you transfer whatever assets you have into that agreement. And it's really just retitling. So, your checking accounts, your bank accounts, they'd be in the name of the trust. Typically, you'd transfer your principal residence into the trust, which just means you create a deed and you name the trust as the owner of the house or investment property. And then with insurance policies, you change beneficiary designations. Of course, none of this is legal advice, right? So you change the beneficiary designations to fund into the trust. But the trickiest assets are usually qualified assets, which are IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, that kind of thing. Yeah. Because there are restrictions on who can own those. And you need to be very careful about how you handle those. But if your trust is set up the right way, then those retirement funds can essentially funnel through the trust, for the benefit of your kids. And then they're the ones that have the trust funds after you pass or you become incapacitated and they're the beneficiaries. So,
okay. So that was a very good question. Thanks, LaShondra, for asking that. Vicky says, great advice, Giff. So
thank you.
Clearly, you're being appreciated. Okay. You do say something on the website that I think really struck a chord for me, and I think it will strike a chord for a lot of people. And I just want to read it because I've heard you say this before. It's imagine that you travel into a piece of land and begin to build without any plans. You have no architectural guidelines or construction blueprints. It would seem unwise, wouldn't it? And yet, in my profession, I encounter this type of thinking related to estate planning on a daily basis. And so that really does resonate with me. And so I get it when you say that.
Yeah. And, it's kind of a cheesy thing to say, but the only thing that's for sure stays the same is change, right? So just recently, this year, there was a change to how retirement account funds will be distributed after the death of the owner.
Yep.
Right? So it used to be you could stretch it out for the lifespan, generally stretch it out for the lifespan of the beneficiary. So if you have a young beneficiary, they have an extended period of time where they can take that money out. If it was an older beneficiary, then they would have a shortened period of time based on their lifespan. So, however, there are certain exceptions, but after someone receives funds from a qualified account, which is like an IRA or 401k or 403b, the money needs to be withdrawn within 10 years. So it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be spent, but it needs to be taken out and reinvested. But the government wants to get their money back within 10 years instead of that extended lifespan that we had prior to this year. So it's kind of a way for them to accelerate when they'll get the tax benefit from those retirement accounts.
Yeah.
So, those are the type of things that we keep an eye on. And when we're building your plan, those are the things that are in the back of our mind. And, one thing that I do want to say is our job is to make it simple. And that's probably one of the biggest roadblocks, and I've talked about this before, is, people think that this process is so difficult. They don't even want to touch it. So, but really, when you're working with an estate planning attorney, you're offering them information that you typically already know, like who you are, who you want to give your stuff to, who you want to make decisions for you, and who's going to watch the kids, and what are your assets, and what are those type of assets. And that's really it. I mean, you'll talk some about your long-term plan, but in most cases, we're talking about if something happens tomorrow. Right. We're not talking about something that might happen 10 years down the road, because your estate plan is a liquid document, like the Constitution. It can be changed. So if you do have a change of mind, like you want to change who your trustees are, who watches the kids, or who's going to make healthcare decisions for you, it's a quick fix that you can do in order to change those agents and the folks who are going to be making decisions for you. So it's easier than you would think. It's easier than you would think.
So for somebody who doesn't have any estate planning in place or anything like that,
right?
Okay, what's the appropriate age? What's the appropriate time? When should someone think about this?
As soon as you turn 18, because
really?
Because the issue becomes when you're 18, you're an adult.
Yep.
And nobody thinks about themselves, right? Because when you're 18, you don't have any money. So everybody thinks it's, I have to have a lot of money in order to have an estate plan. It may just be a simple will, or, maybe there isn't a will. But you do want to have a healthcare power of attorney, and you do want to have a financial power of attorney, because, if you bonk your head and you can't make decisions for yourself, your parents, more than likely, or, your closest relative is going to have to go to court and be appointed your guardian in order to make those decisions for you. So by having these documents in place, with a stroke of a pen, you can avoid all that headache for your family and yourself by having, at least a minimalist plan in place. So for a trust, I lean heavily towards a revocable living trust for anyone with minor kids. And the reason, if there isn't a whole lot of assets there still, if there's something that could benefit the kids, then, you'll want to for sure nominate a guardian for the kids, which you can do with a will-based plan or a trust-based plan. But oftentimes you want to put some structure around how that money can be used, because if the kids are minors and you're not around to teach them either, then they might not be financially responsible when they end up getting this money or getting control of the money. So, and people often, they might have more assets than they think. There might be a $250,000 life insurance policy for the husband and the wife and mom and dad. So they're together if there's 250 plus the life insurance from work. So, then the value of the house and a little here, a little there. And all of a sudden there's a decent amount of assets there that if used correctly and invested correctly could, end up a decent nest egg for their kids. So those are the type of things that we think about because believe it or not, when folks are going about their lives, running their business or just working, they don't think, okay, well, if something were to happen, how much would the kids have to deal with? And, by actually meeting with an attorney and thinking about those things, then you get a better idea about what might need to be in place. So,
right. I think you touched on something that I think a lot of people probably say to themselves that prevent themselves from doing this is, I don't have enough assets. I don't have enough property, or, you know what I'm saying? Like I can imagine that people probably self-eliminate themselves by just saying that, period.
Yeah. And, it's what everybody thinks about, right? Everybody wants to avoid probate, which is the court procedure that you use in order to transfer assets. There's, a few limited times when you might want to use probate if you want court supervision. But typically people want to avoid it because it's kind of long and, often expensive. But it's the incapacity planning that nobody thinks about.
Right.
I mean, fewer people think about. They don't think, well, okay, I can't make these very simple decisions for myself anymore. Or it may just be a decision where physically you're unable to go to the bank. Or you can't string a conversation together for, complicated issues where you might need some temporary help. And if you need that and you haven't put the financial and healthcare power of attorney in place, then again, you need to have agents appointed after that.
Right. And I think I probably personally have seen, I would say probably a handful of businesses that they didn't have a plan in place. So they didn't have a succession plan, or they didn't have anything where when something happened to them, that it fell in the lap of the spouse or the children because the spouse also passed away. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then the business dissolved because they didn't know what to do with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think I've seen probably a few of that, and probably for the fact of, again, nobody wants to imagine themselves dead, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And one of the things that I talk to my clients about a lot is, I don't think of it as, I hate the fear-based stuff, right? Like scaring people into, if you don't do this, then your loved ones' lives are going to be horrible.
Yeah.
So when I talk to clients, I talk to them about by putting this plan in place, they're building something for their loved ones. And it really is a gift to dot the I's, cross the T's, and make sure that these things are taken care of. So when the time comes, not only is it a streamlined process for this, where they're making less decisions than they would, if this plan wasn't in place, but also, you have an idea about what you've built for them. And small business owners, again, we're a special breed, I think. And, it breaks my heart because I understand how hard people work and what they sacrifice, time with kids, time with other loved ones, and they do, they work on the business because they hope that their business is going to get to a point where they are going to be able to take that time with their loved ones later on. So when that value is lost because there isn't a plan in place in order to capture all the time, sweat, and tears they've put into this thing, right. It's not just, the business is going under. It's this person worked their tail off because they had a dream to make something better for the families, and now it's gone.
Right.
So, and they've traded their time to build this thing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't just happen to, because I like using the example of this is not just something that happens to the rich, the poor, or whoever, because there are educated people that don't have estates in place. There are people with a lot of money that don't have it. So you've seen them all, right? I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Or, they were smart years and years ago because they got something in place and they haven't looked at it in 20, 25, 30 years. And now, like, everybody who was going to make decisions for them, of course, they probably don't have minor kids anymore. But,
Right.
that they're either not around or the situations change, relationships change. So it's really not relevant. And the law is more likely to change. Things that I've seen recently are, more complicated trusts that were necessary earlier on, years ago, decades ago. But a lot of the reasons why these more complicated trusts have been put together are irrelevant now, because rules have changed. So often there's additional administration costs for these trusts that may be unnecessary.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question, Giff, is okay. So I had, I think, a living will or something when I was in the military. So I was 18.
yeah, right.
And so that's probably, I'm sure I have it somewhere in a file somewhere. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's probably like, so first off, how does someone know I have this? And second, how do I know that that's worth anything today? Like I need to revamp it, take the dust off and.
Yeah, right. Well, living wills, are different from a will. So a will is, something for your assets. A living will is like if you have a terminal condition or persistent vegetative state, you want, you want the plug pulled or you don't.
Yeah.
So the living will, if it's just dealing with those two things, more than likely it would still work. I mean, you definitely want it reviewed.
Yep.
To make sure that that's the case. But what I do is I actually have, when everything's done, I have a meeting with my clients and their decision makers, and I give them the originals. I give them hard copies, and then I also give them digital copies of all their documents. And then I have a conversation with the decision makers to say, if this happens, then these are the documents that are going to be important to use. And I talk to my clients and say, where are you going to keep these things?
Right.
And they're in the binder that I give them. I kind of call it if it's a trust, like a trustee packet or a personal representative packet. The very first page says originals located here. And there's a spot where they can say it's in the file cabinet or a fireproof safe or the safety deposit box at so-and-so bank. That way people know where those documents are, because believe me, I've run into situations where, people know that there's a trust, but they have absolutely no idea what it says.
Yes. So I can imagine, because when I did this back when I was 18, I'm just surprised I would have even saved my documents, first off.
Good on you for that one.
But then I also would be surprised that anybody would find it. Like if I were to go poof, like something happened to me and I needed that living will, like it's important that there's some kind of chain of command, right? Or some instructions or something. I mean, okay.
Yeah. And like estate planning attitudes have changed, right? Years ago, I think, or at least in the movies, they always seem to have a will reading where everybody's sitting there twiddling their thumbs, wondering how much they're going to get and what the plan is and this kind of thing. Honestly, in order to avoid conflicts and to make things easier, talking to your decision makers and saying, this is my plan and this is where I'm keeping my stuff and this is who I want to receive what while you're alive is the best way to avoid conflicts after you're not able to make decisions anymore.
Okay.
So, and so I think a lot of estate planning attorneys are having that type of conversation with their clients and saying, hey, let folks know what your plan is now. Don't wait.
Yeah. Okay. And Kimberly says, great question, Kat. Thanks. All right. So I have another question. Okay. Because I've seen this either personally or with family and friends. Okay. And I'm sure you've seen it so this is like a twofold. Let me ask the first question. Do you do anything where the family agrees what to do with elderly parents? I mean, how does this play in? How does the elderly parent the children, and let's say that they have some kind of illness like dementia or you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
how does this play in? Because I see this a lot where children are caring for an elderly parent, and then I know there's probably money involved there. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
do you deal with that? Like, what is that?
Yeah, elder law. Okay. Elder law is what it is, and really, it's often, what you're talking about is Medicaid planning.
Okay.
Because if someone has so much money that they can self-pay for assisted living and nursing home costs, then so be it. Often it's kind of the sweet spot where they have enough money, but not enough, a little bit of money, but not enough to cover care for a long period of time, where they kind of get in trouble and they say, well, and I work so hard and I want to try and save some of this money for my beneficiaries. Then, you get into Medicaid planning that way. And usually, one of the best ways for kids to avoid having to do that is to talk to your insurance agent about long-term care policies and whether it makes sense for you. So, I think the average in Wisconsin, and this is average, usually it's more, especially for memory care, because not only are you taking care of somebody physically, but you're taking care of, the memory issues as well. That's the most expensive. So, anywhere from $8,000 to $11,000 a month.
Wow.
For care.
Wow.
And so, you've got these, there's really two ways that you can do it. You can pre-plan.
Yep.
And I'm not going to get into this as legal advice, but you can pre-plan. Which there's a long period of time before you can actually qualify with this pre-planning, and it's 5 years. So if you do something today, you essentially have to wait 5 years in order for it to be effective. And then there's another thing that we call crisis planning, and it's all of a sudden mom or dad needs to go into a nursing home. There's no planning involved at all. What do we do? Do we want them to be qualified for Medicaid? Don't we? And if we do, what can we do? What are the options out there? So it's really, when people are in that situation, there's two routes. They know it's coming, so they're going to pre-plan and use that 5-year look-back period, or it's out of nowhere, or they knew it was coming and they didn't think that they wanted to do the pre-planning, so we're doing the crisis planning now.
Gotcha.
There's a lot going on with those type of cases, because sometimes there are programs that allow care at home, and sometimes that'll qualify for a Medicaid, but it's complicated, and I'm not going to talk too much about it.
No.
Yeah, elder law is the area that area of practice. It's Medicaid planning. Yes.
Okay. And so, because I think that is a real touchy situation with family members, because anybody that I know that's dealing with that is always intense. It's always stressful. But the other thing to that is that the parents never planned for their estate or their will. And then you have all these family members fighting, and, just it's horrible because people are different.
Yeah. And it's, and again, it's one of those things where if they hear it from your mouth first, it's definitely better than people trying to guess at what the intention was before. And so talking about those kind of things, like, because a lot of times there might be someone who has received a little more care while the parent was alive, or a little more assistance while the parent was alive. And, everyone has a different attitude towards money.
Yep.
And, but I would say the majority of cases, folks get along. There's, there can be some hairy moments just because it is a stressful time, but, but you do hear stories where things kind of get out of control.
Yeah.
And,
But just to say though, that your focus is nip it in the butt before these things evolve, before these things erupt, before these things happen, because nobody wants to deal with that when a loved one is passing or something's happened to them, right?
Yeah. And, the other thing the other reason that I like working with people earlier rather than later is, you're going to have a decent idea about how the trust works, right? But, I went to law school. I've been practicing estate planning for a while. And of course, I still have questions about how some of these things work sometimes. And I have got to ask questions as well. So when someone sets their trust up for the first time, they're going to have a good understanding. But as time goes on, they might want to tweak how things are going to be distributed because they understand the process a little bit better. When they go over this a couple of times, it's like meeting with your financial planner once a year. The more that you talk about it, the more you'll understand how all these different provisions work and why they're there.
Right.
So that's why I like getting started early, because you'll be able to get closer to what you actually want. And just the fact of going through it, you'll think about it and understand what you want a little bit better than you did at the beginning.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. It makes absolute total sense. Okay, so Giff, I'm not going to pressure you to talk anymore. And I know you want to give as much information as you can. And you're like, no, I don't want to say anymore. And I know every situation is different. So just as a disclaimer, every situation is different. And at the end of the day, your job is just to make it easy on the person who needs the help and the assistance. And you're going to guide them to the best of your ability to achieve the results that they want, And so
I agree. I mean, it really is a personal process, because some folks worry about one thing that other people, they don't care about. Right. So we don't need to plan for that issue because we really don't care whether it happens or not. So, of course, unless it's, so it really is a personal thing. And, I try to take as much time with my clients as I can to understand who they are, and then, understand think for them and try and figure out what issues they might be concerned about, just based on the things that they're talking to me about. So,
right. No. So you do a free consult. So if people have questions, right? You do a free consult. I do know that. I'm going to pop up your website so everybody can see it. And then what else are you offering anybody who's tuning in?
Yeah, I'll do for folks that are tuning in now that are new clients. I'll do 10% off for cat listeners.
Yay. That's awesome. So reach out to Giff, because he is offering, like, if you consult with him, he does do the free consult. So you get at least to talk to him. But if you like what you hear, he's offering 10% off his fees, which is incredible. And I think that's awesome. But this is Giff's website. Just check it out. You can set up the free consult there, then and there. Don't need to go anywhere else. And in the URL, and I'll also put it in the comments too, Giff, is giffcollinslaw.com. And again, I will put it, the URL. Oh, well, I can just copy and paste it right now in the comments. And then please, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to Giff. He is a huge resource. And you're doing Zoom calls, right? During this time, so people can be safe. You're doing Zoom calls?
Yeah, up until we actually sign the documents. Yep. All my meetings have been Zoom meetings at this point. And I found that to be effective with initial consultations. And it really is kind of easy. And less of a hassle for folks to get some good information. So,
okay, you have a question. Someone asked, "Where are you licensed?" Thanks, Alexandria.
Yeah, Wisconsin and Illinois.
Okay, so awesome. So Wisconsin, and Illinois, he can help you out, and then even if their parents are here, right? Because a lot of times the children are looking for attorneys for their parents if their parents don't have an estate, right?
That gets a little tricky.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Well, it's good. It's good that, the kids are thinking about that and thinking, we don't want to be left with a huge mess at the end. Yep. But in the end, they could, I would meet with the clients who are the mom and dad on their own. Okay. We keep the kids out of it for the most part, right? They'll stay in the waiting room.
I love it. Okay.
But yeah, no, it is good to encourage people to get this done, whatever they decide in the end, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it often if you do get those calls where mom and dad don't have anything in place, and
Yeah.
but yeah, we'd be working with mom and dad.
No kids, just the mom and dad in there. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Giff. I appreciate it. And I hope everybody else who is watching today appreciates it. If anybody watching, even in the replay, if you have any questions, just drop a line and I will tag Giff on each of the questions. So I'll go back and look at all the questions on your behalf, Giff, and tag you if anybody is asking you a question directly. And thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Great. This is great. I hope you have a great day. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.